Well, you can cry me a river, cry me a river.
Greetings from Castle Goring, from Nikki, Aurora, and from me. Well, today I am going to interweave. I have been hearing some very interesting and sometimes rather incendiary things, and I'm going to be very careful how I communicate them. Because I don't want there to be any misunderstandings whatsoever. But I'm going to try as much as possible to adhere to the normal format of question and answer. But I am going to be interweaving stuff that I have been receiving. My bongo drums have been beating out very interesting tunes, some of which is quite momentous, but some of it also could be very open to misinterpretation, and I'm certainly not going to be giving any rather irresponsible people weapons with which to attack those who really they should be grateful to. So without further ado, let me plunge in with what Ellen Lyons says. Lady C, what is your opinion of the woe is me interview Harry gave to the BBC? And do you think after the Bashir debacle, the BBC should have gone there, giving him a platform to attack his father, the establishment and royal household? And would Harry have been informed prior to the judge's ruling being released to the public? Does this mean either he has the BBC on speed dial, or was this pre-recorded, as I saw that he's in Vegas? And that interview appears to have been filmed in the same place they filmed with the families of the children who unalived themselves after cyberbullying. But I don't think that was in Vegas. But Ellen Lance, thank you for this question. I'm going to use it to interweave some of what I have been told. If I refer to my notes, it's because I want to nail things down, but not so particularly that anybody listening who might want clues as to whom I've been speaking would be able to discern from what I say. Because, of course, certain people speak in characteristic ways and others would know that. So every now and then one has to slightly rejig. Okay, what is my opinion of the interview? Appalling, treacherous, insane, vicious. Harry has made it absolutely clear that he is not only the enemy of his father and his brother and of the British establishment, irrespective of the party, and we'll get to that in a while, because Harry and Meghan are really clever political players, and they think that because this is a left-wing government, that it's naturally going to, of course, jump on their bandwagon. So stupid of them, but there we go. The BBC, any news organization offered an interview like that would have been remiss to fail to oblige. Let's put it that way. Because, of course, it's incendiary, and of course, it's going to have caused a lot of waves, and that's a broadcaster's delight. Would the BBC care about the Bashir interview? Would they have a conscience? You need scruples to have a conscience. They have already shown they have neither scruples nor conscience. So that wasn't even going to come into the consideration. Was Harry informed prior of the judge's ruling? You're always informed prior to the ruling what it has been before it is made public. You are informed You are given the ruling. You know exactly what you're going to be dealing with. You know when it's going to be announced. It's perfectly standard. So yes, Harry knew. Did he have this BBC on speed dial? Well, he knows that the BBC is very obliging in plunging the knife into the royal establishment. And of course, being the treacherous little bastard that he is, that's exactly what he has done. He has plunged the knife in using some organization that he knew would have been delighted to do so. But I am not criticizing the BBC. I'm criticizing Harry. He was very carefully coached. You could tell he was not only coached, he kept on looking to his cues and his cuer, who was to his right. And you could almost see him at times thinking and almost saying without using words, I'm doing well, am I not? Oh, yes, I'm on target, yeah. And yes, I'm really doing as I ought to. Well, he was very carefully coached. Very carefully coached. And let's remember, not only did he give that interview, which he knew would be incendiary and abusing his family and the British establishment, he has accused the king, his father, the royal household, Ravek, the judges, and the British establishment generally of being corrupt and of being prejudiced. The underlying message is they're prejudiced against him because he married a proud, confident woman of colour and star of suits. That's the underlying message. And it's outrageous. It's outrageous that any prince of the blood would do that under any circumstances. Harry's just lucky that he doesn't bear the title of Duke of Clarence, and there's not a vat of Malmsey handy. I leave it at that. I'm going to cover some of the points that were raised by Harry in his speech to the BBC. And notice I said speech. His speech, which is calculated to damage the royal family and the British political establishment of both parties. Because remember, he's trying to rope in the Prime Minister and Yvette Cooper, the Home Secretary, as well. This is totally incorrect behaviour under any circumstances. It is an abuse of his position. It is an abuse of such power as he has. This is not only the height of irresponsibility, it is the height of abusiveness. He's declared that this was going to be the end of the road in terms of the litigation, and he had been led to believe that he would win. You idiot! Of course you were going to be led to believe that you would win by your legal team. They were going to make money, you idiot. It was obvious you were never going to win. Why weren't you going to win? Because Harry, when you're selling rotten tomatoes, don't expect people to join the queue and they can see the rotten tomatoes and smell the stink, and you are telling them that you are selling them caviar. It's just ridiculous. But anyway, it was always apparent that it was a weak case, but evidently Harry and Meghan are so delusional that they actually expected to win. I mean, unbelievable. Well, he, in his speech to the BBC, and notice how I call it a speech, because it is a political speech calculated to do maximum damage to the head of state of this country and the lawyers who are on the other side and the judges who have judged him. He speaks about the risk management. Now, according to Sir Geoffrey Voss, Mr. Justice Voss is the master of the rolls. He's the head of the Civil Justice and president of the Court of Appeals Civil Division. He's the senior judge in the country. He was very careful to explain that in 2020, it was explained to Harry that the Risk Management Board would not undertake. Now, this is very damning. Let me emphasize this point. This is very damning. When the senior judge in the country feels that he has to break down his judgment for public consumption to address the mischievous lies of somebody who is a member of the royal family, you know you're dealing with do-lally time. He said that Harry was informed that the Risk Management Board would not undertake further risk analyses for the Duke of Sussex because they were no longer required given the alternative governance arrangements that were to be established on a case-by-case basis for the future. This was because Harry had declared he was leaving the royal family in his position as a working royal. He was moving abroad and he was no longer going to be living in this country. So I'm going to quote Sir Richard Actually, let me roll back just a bit because this is so important. That the Risk Management Board would not undertake further risk analyses for the Duke of Sussex because they were no longer required given the alternative governance arrangements that were to be established on a case-by-case basis for the future. He doesn't say, but what he is saying as a result of Harry's departure. He then continues. Sir Richard had, however, obtained 3 threat assessments for the Duke of Sussex during February 2020 before writing the decision letter. Harry has been complaining legally and now on the BBC that there was no risk assessment done and there should have been. And Mr. Justice Voss went to great lengths to explain to the world, and you would imagine that Harry is a part of the world, so to Harry as well, that there were 3 threat assessments done in February. That Harry's ongoing 24/7 high-risk protection was going to end on the 31st of March when he and Meghan departed from the country by consent. And I ought to make the point at this point that Harry had also been aware of the fact that a part of the agreement was if he left being a working royal, his security would change. And he was fine about that. He was perfectly happy to go along with that and agree to it when he wanted to leave. It was only after he and Meghan realised that they couldn't use Sussex Royal, they couldn't abuse their royal status, they were being prevented from using their Royal Highness titles altogether, both privately and publicly, and certainly for commercial purposes, that they, when the penny finally dropped, that they weren't going to have the great show of royalty that they were used to up to that point, you know, the outriders, the security, that they weren't going to be able to impress the world with their royal status via security. Because I have to tell you, much of security in terms of most members of the public who are rich, most of the time, it's totally unnecessary. It's to convey to the world how important they are. And Harry and Meghan, and that's their shtick as well. But anyway, so when Harry says there was no risk management, there didn't need to be. There had been 3 risk assessments. So according to Mr. Justice Foss, he says, Sir Richard and Ravik had given compelling reasons for having reached the conclusion that the appropriate course was to establish bespoke arrangements for when the Duke returned to the United Kingdom on future visits. The Duke was in effect stepping in and out of the cohort of protection provided by Ravik. Outside the UK, he was outside the cohort. But when in the UK, his security would be considered as appropriate depending on the circumstances. It was impossible, I say in my judgment, to say that this reasoning was illogical or inappropriate, which of course is Harry's point. That is not only illogical and inappropriate, but it's also a violation of his God-given right to permanent 24/7 security because he was born the son of Charles and Diana. Indeed, it seemed sensible. Finally, even if there had been a risk analysis from the Risk Management Board, it would very likely have only confirmed the threat, vulnerability, and impact levels which the Duke had faced when earlier risk analyses were undertaken. But it would have had nothing to say on the critical features of the changed situation, which were the need for protective security on future uncertain visits and the government's appetite for risk. The decisions taken in the decision letter and subsequently were taken, I said in my judgment, as an understandable and perhaps predictable reaction to the Duke of Sussex having stepped back from royal duties and having left the UK to live principally overseas. So the conclusion in my judgment, to which my colleagues Lord Justices Bean and Edith agree, was that the Duke of Sussex's appeal would be dismissed. Now, what Mr. Justice Foss has said in plain English is that Harry doesn't have the right to UK taxpayers funding his security when he's out of the United Kingdom. And when he's in it, he has to inform them, and then they will assess it on a case-by-case basis, which is perfectly reasonable. Also, what Harry has neglected to tell anybody and seems to not understand is that Princess Anne doesn't have the level of security he would like to have for himself. Prince Edward doesn't have it. Sophie Edinburgh doesn't have it. William and Catherine have it. None of the other royals has it, not one, except for Charles, Camilla, William, and Catherine. The reality is, even if Harry had stayed in the United Kingdom, his security would have been downgraded at some point, in much the same way that Eugenie and Beatrice's security was not only downgraded, but eliminated except on very rare occasions. So I make all of those points for what they are worth. My information is that this is not about security. This is about IPP status and status generally. Harry and Meghan have understood that not only does he have access to privileged and confidential information if he has IPP status, but that his security is paid for by the state in which he finds himself. So the United States of America would be the primary carrier of the charges while he is in the United States. Obviously, no government wants to inflict an unnecessary burden upon another government's taxpayers. This is very important, and nobody seems to be picking this up, except obviously the people I'm speaking to and now me. Harry's, and I'm going to quote, Harry's paranoia, entitlement, spite, and malice were in full view. His inability to acknowledge the facts, to accept responsibility, his viciousness, and self-pity were also in full view. Harry is a blackmailer. He's basically threatening to do another Netflix expose unless he gets what he wants. Well, I think Harry is going to discover he's going to have to do another Netflix expose because he's not going to get what he wants. Not only is he not going to get what he wants, but if he does another Netflix expose with yet more lies, Harry is going to discover that there is such a thing as a bridge too far. And Harry, call their bluff. Call their bluff and wait and see. Harry, I was told, is also regarded as a gaslighter. His misguided belief that he would win the case when it was obvious he could not have won it shows how totally out of touch with reality he is. He's right to say the family won't forgive him. And he mentioned for writing the book, well, other people are mentioning not only writing the book full of lies, but for lying on Oprah, ruining the last years of the late Queen's life, and the last weeks of Prince Philip's being coloured by his and Meghan's treachery, inflicting unconscionable stress on the King and the Princess of Wales, which has led to their illnesses, according to the belief of some people, and certainly has, whether it had a part to play in it or not, and many people think it did, that it's no coincidence that Harry has ended up, and Meghan have ended up accusing the King and Catherine, both of whom ended up with cancer, of being racists, actually threatening their very existence as royals and their right to function and remain royals. Because can you imagine the effects it would have had if people had believed this claptrap? They would have been calling for Charles's abdication. They'd have been calling for William to step out of the line of succession or divorce Catherine, which some people believe is what Harry and Meghan are hoping to orchestrate. Now that's another one that you haven't heard before, but you will be hearing it time and again from now on, because there is also that as a possibility. The completely unconscionable and brutal and inhumane and callous way Charles and Catherine have been treated has not gone unnoticed by anyone, including in the royal family, but not only in the royal family, in the wider circle. I was told that Harry and Meghan's objective, which I couldn't agree with more, is to create as much chaos as possible and to create as many frenzies as they can. My own interpretation has been all along that this was an attention-seeking device. Some people are beginning to think that it is actually a way of trying to knock William and Catherine out of the line of succession, which would be ridiculous, because if Catherine and William are out of the line of succession, their children are in it still. Harry and Meghan aren't going to be in it. But Harry and Meghan are so delusional and so, well, dumb is the word, really, that maybe they believe differently. Anyway, the palace will not be sucked into the game of frenzies and react. They're not going to react. They will, when appropriate, such as in this instance, respond, but they will never react. And their statement, which was pretty concise, was also pretty comprehensive. Their statement read, "All these issues have been examined repeatedly and meticulously by the courts, with the same conclusion reached on each time." In other words, Harry has no case, never did, is thoroughly unreasonable, is abusing the court system. I don't know why he's not, well, I was going to say, I don't know why he's not made a vexatious litigant, but I do know why he's not been made a vexatious litigant so far. But maybe if he keeps on pushing his luck, he will be made a vexatious litigant, because that would have the approval of lots of people, including within his own family, and certainly within the legal profession. Harry has been wasting taxpayers' money. He's been wasting court time. It is totally unacceptable. I was told the palace will not be retaliating either. They've responded, they're not going to be retaliating. Harry and Meghan are playing one game. The palace are playing another. Harry and Meghan want to set the agenda and determine the game and its outcome. The palace is even more determined not to play Harry and Meghan's game, which is what Meghan and Harry would like them to do. The palace's objective is to either coexist peaceably and civilly with Harry and Meghan, or then to deal with them as adversaries, which is what they're now doing, in a two-pronged approach. The first prong is watch and wait and allow them to expose themselves further, losing supporters while increasing the royal family's band of supporters is what I'm going to say. They said something slightly different. And the second prong, but they've been doing that all along, and it's been working very well, because every time Harry and or Meghan does something, it exposes them further. And they don't gain followers, they don't gain sympathy, they lose followers and they lose sympathy. But anyway, the second prong is the palace are prepared to watch and wait until Harry and Meghan make such a fatal error that it will be safe for the palace to chop them off at the knees. Safe meaning with respect to Meghan and Harry's supporters, it's Harry and Meghan's supporters, who have been duped by them and who are innocent of their malignancy. The identity politics or bleeding hearts, I think that's just a note I took. So I think that refers to the supporters of Harry and Meghan who are into identity politics. You know, Meghan's a woman of colour. I'm a woman of colour. You're a woman of colour. Everybody's a woman of colour, and therefore we must all band together. Or, I'm a white boy married to a black girl, and everybody has to support me who's black or white. So they're playing the race card, and they've been doing it all along, and they're doing other identity politics along the lines of political persuasion. And then, of course, they're the bleeding hearts, people who don't think and therefore accept any of their rubbish. However, the palace's technique requires patience. But so far, Harry and Meghan's increasingly irrational conduct shows that the day might come, whether sooner or later remains to be seen, when they are going to make such a fatal error that they get chopped off at the knees. But in the meantime, they're the ones chopping themselves off at the knees. And I was told, don't hold my breath to wait for the palace to do anything precipitate at this point, but also do not be surprised if at some point they really don't do something with a stroke of a pen. The stroke of a pen is what I was told. Now, Harry claims history is repeating itself is truly offensive to everybody. First of all, neither the royal family, nor the palace, nor the royal establishment, nor the general establishment, nor the police, nor anybody else stripped Diana of her security. And incidentally, Harry's ideas of the threats against him are something I will come to hopefully, because the fact of the matter is there's a belief now in certain circles that Harry deliberately put that about that very offensive comment and very against military protocol, that he would tot up his score of 25 and refer to human beings as chess pieces. And he obviously, because he alludes to it, and that's made him a bigger threat. Well, he had a choice. He didn't have to put it in. And the fact of the matter is he's still around like an empty vessel, clattering around, making a lot of noise. So the threat can't have been very great. And quite frankly, Harry, if you invite people to dinner, don't be surprised when they eat at your table. So let's leave it at that for the moment. But the fact of the matter is there is a strong belief that Harry did this deliberately to blackmail the family and Ravik into restoring his and Meghan's IPP status and their security, so that Harry and Meghan would thereafter be able to flaunt themselves and flounce around the world with outriders and stopping traffic lights, and also getting information that what would they do with the information that they're getting, because they can't be trusted with anything. And what would they be doing with the information that they were getting? And with whom would they be sharing it? Let's leave it at that. But history repeating itself. Diana died because she got into a car, she didn't wear a seatbelt, she phoned up the paparazzi, she told them where she was going to be, she played a cat and mouse game with them, one which she had played repeatedly, incidentally. I mean, I quote photographers in the Real Diana book who told me that she had personally phoned them up and she used to play cat and mouse games with them. And sometimes she would drive her car very dangerously. But there is the findings of the inquest were that Henri Paul was over the limit in terms of alcohol. Whether the accident would have taken place had he not been is not even a moot point, because he was sufficiently in command of his faculties to 90 seconds before he got into that car to get down on his haunches and tie his shoelaces. So he was in absolute command of his faculties 3 or 4 minutes before that crash, when he and Dodi died immediately and Diana died some hours later. So it's the fact that she didn't have on a seatbelt and that she had courted the publicity and she had courted the people who were chasing her. So she begged them to chase her. Then she was running away from them, playing a cat and mouse game. Harry is doing the same thing. Harry, if history repeats itself, it's because you haven't learned the lesson. You won't have learned the lesson. Don't court publicity if you don't want to suffer the consequences of courting publicity. But Harry says, through the court process, I have discovered that some people want history to repeat itself. I'm sure that some people out there, probably most likely the people that wish me harm, consider this a huge win. I mean, the guy's nuts, projecting his malice onto other people. As for Meghan's part in all of this, I'm told that there is no doubt that she is the controller. She was welcomed by the family at first because she was able to control him. It has become apparent in the passage of time that she controls him, but she also not only controls him, she controls his emotions. And she has planted let me rephrase that. She has opened his eyes to an awful lot of things that he was blind to before, by their own admission, which have resulted in tremendous hatred of his family, hatred of the institution into which he was born and which protected him, and so enhanced his reputation that he was as popular then as he is unpopular now. But Harry's statement, I think, deserves a little bit of recounting. I have uncovered my worst fears, and to now know today based on this judgment that there was no legal framework that constrains the decisions of this body Ravek on which the royal household sit on. And I didn't know that until this legal process in 2021. One of the first, so in other words, they're responsible for his ignorance. One of the first things my lawyer said to me as disclosure started, as this process started, was, "Did you know that the royal household sit on Ravek?" And my jaw hit the floor. I can't see a world in which I will be bringing my wife and children back to the UK at this point. And the things they are going to miss is everything. Blackmail, blackmail, blackmail. I'm not going to bring them back unless you give me what I want. I love my country and always have done. Strange way of showing it. Despite what some people in that country have done. Oh, you see? So many people in Britain have ruined Harry's life. So I miss the UK. I miss parts of the UK. Of course I do. I think it's really quite sad that I won't be able to show my children my homeland. But what Harry has completely lost track of is he brought his children the year the Queen died, remember? The week before the Queen died, when he showed her Lily, and they had their photographer waiting to snap Lily and Lilibet, and the Queen refused it. That's for another time. But has it not struck you as odd that the late Queen made sure that there are no photographs, bar one, of her with either Archie or Lilibet? Remember, she didn't even go to Archie's christening. There are no photographs of her with Archie, bar the very first photograph taken 2 weeks. Oh, sorry. Harry said it was 2 weeks, but in fact, everybody else said it was 2 days after Archie's supposed arrival on this earth, when the baby was shown to Prince Philip and the Queen with Doria present. That's the sole photograph. Well, that's something for later. Harry asserted that it was an establishment stitch-up. Well, I was told Harry is trying to play the left-wing government against his father and the royal establishment, but that is a very unsound tactic. And why is it an unsound tactic? First of all, Harry knows only too well that no member of the royal family, save the King and Queen and the Prince and Princess of Wales and their 3 children, have 24/7 security. None. It just doesn't happen. Also, Harry, so the government doesn't have a basis upon which to overturn the court's judgment. Also, Harry ought to know, I mean, let's remember, Meghan worked at the State Department in Buenos Aires as, what was it? The head controller of the whole of the South American continent, or some such thing, I forget what. It couldn't have been that her father paid for her to have a 5-week internship. No, it couldn't have been. It has to be what she said it was. Remember, her truth is always the lie. Sorry, the truth. Well, Harry ought to know, and Meghan, let's remember, Meghan again is Rachel Zane. Rachel Zane should know only too well that there is a big separation between the judiciary and the executive and the government. So You can't have the government overriding the courts in this country. And certainly neither the Prime Minister nor the Home Secretary would have a right, nor would it be correct procedure for them to interfere in a lawsuit and override the judgment of the master of the rolls. I mean, this is insanity. But Harry is banking on the fact that Keir Starmer and Yvette Cooper are left-wing, and he and Meghan are avowedly left-wing, although they're not left-wing. Harry and Meghan are two of the biggest elitists of all time. They pretend to be left-wing. What they are is elitist dictators who want to cram their power down everybody's throat. And they think that because they have left-wing advocacy, that they are going to be able to get Keir Starmer and Yvette Cooper on their side. No, they're not. They seem to forget that the King and Prince William are sufficiently woke that that Keir Starmer and Yvette Cooper wouldn't be swapping two non-entities for two actual existing entities who already are people they can do business with. So you see, it helps at times for the King and the Prince of Wales to straddle the divide and be not only conservative in some respects, but woke in others. So, but Harry, of course, is too dumb to have figured that one out. But I understand it's not Harry. I understand Meghan is behind a lot of this. Harry would have given up long ago if Meghan hadn't been pressing his buttons. Then Harry blaming the security issue for his father's failure to speak to him is, I was told, myopic, to put it mildly. It's his father and his brother and pretty much the whole of his family don't want to speak to him. They don't want to have anything to do with him because they have come to realize he is dangerous. He is prepared to damage them without thought, feeling, or conscience or scruples. He's forgotten about the Oprah interview. He's forgotten about the distress he caused his grandmother. He's forgotten about the Netflix interview where, but for the grace of God, the Queen would have lived to see Harry and Meghan trashing the Commonwealth as a white oppressing entity which has been created so rich white people in England can steal the natural resources of poor black people in Africa and elsewhere. Empire 2.0, as it was called by their advocate. All the other lies that the King and Catherine are racist, these have not been denied. These have been allowed to stand. Harry doesn't get it. His father can't speak to him because Harry has shown himself to be a deadly enemy of his father, of what his father represents. And he says, has the unmitigated goal to say that he has forgiven them. That's the abuser forgiving the victim for by possessing skin and bones. to have caused the abuser's knuckles under this pressure that they were exerting against the victim to bruise. So the victim should apologize to the abuser for the fact that the abuser, in the act of abusing the victim, ended up with bruised knuckles. I mean, that's really interesting. And as for Harry's victim posture, what I'm struggling to forgive, and will probably always struggle to forgive, is that it's a decision that was made in 2020 that affects me every single day, and that is knowingly putting me and my family in harm's way. Harry, nobody's putting you and your family in harm's way. Ravik has said every time you come over, they will give you you and your family, an appropriate level of security. What they're not prepared to do is give you IPP status and 24/7 security for the rest of your life. That's not what they're prepared to do. Nobody's putting your life at risk. If you come to this country, you are very simply either allowed to inform Ravik, and you stay in suitable accommodation, including palaces, where you have round-the-clock protection just by virtue of the premises upon which you are standing, sitting, or lying. Or then you go to a hotel. Nobody knows you're at the hotel. Nobody's coming after you. And if they are, quite frankly, Harry, what can I tell you? Life's tough. You make your bed, you lie in it. Especially when you lie deliberately to create threats against yourself. Everybody knows that you don't have a score of 25. It's not possible. You think I'm defaming you? Please feel free to sue me. Harry says life is precious, and that having forgiven his family for all the abuse he heaped upon them, sorry. That's the reality of it. In Harry's mind, having forgiven the family for all the abuse that he has invented against them, they are now to receive him with open arms, because life is precious, and he doesn't know how long his father has. Well, nobody knows how long anybody has. I mean, any one of us can walk out onto the street and we're under a building and a brick falls and brains us. I mean, those are the realities of life. Very remote possibility, but nobody actually knows how long they have. But certainly it was an extremely tasteless remark of Harry's to make, but manipulative, blackmailing, and calculated to blackmail and create problems for the family, except everybody's now, with few exceptions, are wise to Harry and know that it's all rubbish. And if life is so precious, Harry, why aren't you and Meghan getting in touch with her father by her own account? The only offence her father ever committed was in the run-up to your wedding, when Jeff Rayner, who was her photographer, got in touch with her sister Samantha to pretend that he was going to rescue Thomas Markle's reputation, and in fact is the one who threw him to the wolves. So in that big stitch-up, You know all about stitch-ups, and Meghan knows all about stitch-ups. And you project your gift for stitch-ups onto the supposed establishment. But life is precious. If life is so precious, is not Meghan's father's life worth, if not an equal amount, certainly a commensurate degree of consideration as your father's? Oh, sorry, I forgot. One has money, the other doesn't. Oh, silly me. I was told that Harry's statement afterwards was filled with misleading statements, but shows his obsession with safety. He kept on using the word safety. Safe is Meghan's word. It's her obsession. She's been deploying it from long before she even met Harry. Under her influence, he is using it the way she does to get her own way. Because who but an evil person would prevent her from feeling safe, even if that safety comes at the cost to taxpayers? And keeping himself and Meghan and now his children safe is now the latest drum that they are beating, to no effect, incidentally. And we come to the really awkward part of this, which is that in my first book on Meghan and Harry, and I think in the updated version, Meghan and Harry, the real story, persecutors or victims, I mention and I need to be delicate with this whole matter, I mention the fear of his family, that Meghan would do such a thorough job on mixing him up and playing him like a violin. And I'm going to mix my metaphors to get the point across, and be like an egg beater in his brain, to such an extent that he would end up not only executing at all turns her directives to the detriment of his own well-being and his relationship with his family and his friends and the world generally, but that she would end up creating such conflicts and losses within him that he would end up, possibly their great fear was that he would ultimately find a permanent solution to a problem that, no matter how awesomely tiresome it was, or how monumental it was actually not necessarily permanent. And this is YouTube, so I need to be delicate, but I hope you get my meaning. Well, the fear that Meghan is encouraging Harry on a path that will ultimately result in that outcome has now let me skip what I was going to say and just put it like this. Can you imagine the opportunity for self-promotion? And can you imagine the photo ops that would be dropping in Meghan's lap if Harry created a situation where she could present herself as a tragic figure taking a leaf out of Jackie Kennedy's book. Can you imagine? All draped in widow's weeds, with a long platform of a lifelong platform of sympathy, pity, and self-pity. Then, of course, there would be the matter of, and this is now going to be a feature of consideration at some point, as it is with all members of the royal family. Where will Harry ultimately end up? The lost Duke of Sussex did not end up in the royal burial plot at Frogmore. He ended up, if I remember correctly, at Kensal Rise or Bethnal Green Cemetery. He was buried, if I remember correctly, beside his wife, his second wife, the Duchess of Inverness. It was a morganatic marriage, or as close to a morganatic marriage as the British state would allow. And he was Queen Victoria's favourite uncle. He is the one who led Queen Victoria down the aisle for her marriage to Prince Albert. But nobody wants a Thomas à Becket repetition, save possibly those who enjoy drama and would not only take secret delight in the opportunities that such a tragic role would give them, but would also be able to milk the situation for the rest of their lives. But Harry needs to be aware of one fact. No matter how much someone loves you, there comes a point when you abuse them to such an extent that while they still wish you well, what was once viewed with horror can end up being viewed with acceptance, if not indifference. And on that note, I will say, I think I've said enough for one day. And if you would like, please feel free to ask me any question on this or any other subject, and I will be delighted to answer it if it is within my ability to do so. Thank you very much for listening. Please keep the questions and comments coming in, so I will know what you would like us to be covering. Okay? Thank you so much. Take good care and Godspeed. And if you have truly enjoyed this, would you care to like, share, subscribe, press the notification bell, and a bientôt. Bye-bye.